Welcome to Rev'd Up for Sunday, everyone. We're the clergy and staff member of St. Mark's Episcopal Church in New Canaan, Connecticut. I'm Elizabeth Garnsey.
I'm John Kennedy.
And I'm Rob Schwartz.
And we're continuing on with our look at the Gospels for the upcoming Sunday. And we're coming up on the 25th Sunday after Pentecost, one Sunday short of Christ the King before we lead into Advent. So it's getting climactic, folks. Let's see what this vengeful story has to teach us today. This is Matthew 25, verses 14 to 30. For it is as if a man going on a journey summoned his slaves and entrusted his property to them. To one he gave 5 talents, to another 2, to another 1, to each according to his ability. Then he went away. The one who had received the 5 talents went off at once and traded with them and made 5 more talents. In the same way, the one who had the 2 talents made 2 more talents. But the one who had received the 1 talent went off and dug a hole in the ground and hid his master's money. After a long time, the master of those slaves came and settled accounts with them. Then the one who had received the 5 talents came forward, bringing 5 more talents, saying, Master, you handed over to me 5 talents. See, I have made 5 more talents. His master said to him, Well done, good and trustworthy slave. You have been trustworthy in a few things. I will put you in charge of many things. Enter into the joy of your master. And the one with the 2 talents also came forward, saying, Master, you handed over to me 2 talents. See, I have made 2 more talents. His master said to him, Well done, good and trustworthy slave. You have been trustworthy in a few things. I will put you in charge of many things. Enter into the joy of your master. Then the one who had received the 1 talent also came forward, saying, Master, I knew that you were a harsh man, reaping where you did not sow, and gathering where you did not scatter seed. So I was afraid, and I went and hid your talent in the ground. Here you have what is yours. But his master replied, You wicked and lazy slave, you knew, did you, that I reap where I did not sow, and gather where I did not scatter? Then you ought to have invested the money with the bankers, and on my return I would have received what was my own with interest. So take the talent from him and give it to the one with the 10 talents. For to all those who have, more will be given, and they will have an abundance. But from those who have nothing, even what they have will be taken away. As for this worthless slave, throw him into the outer darkness, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. The gospel of the Lord.
Thanks be to God.
Back to gnashing of teeth
I
and
know.
weeping.
Exactly.
I feel
And
like
outer darkness.
I feel like if they had hashtags back then, Matthew definitely would have been hashtagging weeping and gnashing of teeth
Exactly.
in many of his messages.
Oh, that was a favorite.
Right. little, dun-dun-dun.
Yeah.
I need sound effects.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, so this is a really popular story for Sunday schools all around the world, and right? I mean, it's a kid's story. Yeah, I think no, it isn't a kid's story, but I remember learning this in Sunday school.
I
didn't get that one.
Oh wow!
Yeah.
I don't know if they left off the last bit, but I think that I remember being taught that. The classic reading that you shouldn't hide your talents in the ground, that you should, use what God has given you and it will bear fruit and multiply and all that stuff. So
Let your light shine.
Yeah. What do you guys make of this? Who wants to give us a little?
One of the things, I'm going to lead off with my shirt today instead of tuck it away. I'm not going to bury my shirt away for later. I'm just going to give it all right now. When I was thinking about what to do, this seems like one of these passages that can easily be manipulated as a kind of prosperity gospel type thing, like give it all to God and you'll receive numerous rewards back, but if you don't, you'll be cast out into the outer darkness type of thing,
right?
And I remember Brian McLaren saying in one of his podcasts, fear can only get you so far. It only motivates you so much, and I think there's a lot more at play than just something like that. But that's why for the shirt I did, your worth is not measured by your productivity. Or as the coffee pot says, John said, your ability to make coffee does not justify your worth.
Right.
But I think that really what this is more about, and kind of like you said, is how are we using what we've been given for the kingdom? And this comes at a time as we've kind of had these discourses. Jesus is really preparing his disciples for, look, there's going to be a point when I'm gone, and you're going to have to go on without me. And so how do they live without him? And I think that's a big theme here that he's trying to get across.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. Jesus is talking about what it means to live faithfully and fruitfully, certainly in the time following his passion and resurrection, but I would say that he also likely has in view what was for him the present relationship between God and Israel, God's people, God's chosen people with whom God had made a covenant. And I think Jesus is saying that this is following from Jesus' denunciation of the religious authorities, the scribes, the Pharisees, and so on, calling them out for their hypocrisy and really their failure to be the light of the world that Jesus calls the people of God to be in the Sermon on the Mount, which is riffing on language in Isaiah. I will give you to be a light to the nations. Jesus is saying that this is the vocation, and too many, especially those who consider themselves experts and leaders and holy people, have failed. They have taken the light, the gifts that God has given them, the law, the temple, the promises, the covenant, and they have buried it in the ground. And it's a warning, therefore, and a prophetic sort of denunciation, particularly, I think, directed towards the religious authorities of his time, but also a warning for all of us who consider ourselves, the people of God, to live faithfully. A super interesting thing is that the word talent that we use to describe like gifts and abilities and things like that, of course, originally meant money in this New Testament sense. It only appears twice in the whole New Testament, both in the Gospel of Matthew here in this passage and an earlier passage that we looked at several weeks ago, the parable of the unforgiving servant, where we also see this unit of coinage, this currency appear. The reason why we call gifts and abilities and things talents is because of this parable.
Interesting.
Yeah.
That is interesting. Wow. We'll have to look up some etymology on that word, right?
Yeah.
Wow. The power of Scripture to me is kind of mind-blowing because, terribly mind-blowing because I think all these readings are true and have huge wisdom. And then I think there's a completely kind of opposite reading, which makes the one with the one talent sort of the hero of the story. And in the context of Jesus, I mean, having been through this whole cycle of Matthew now, we're reaching the end of our ordinary time and our look at Matthew in the year A. We're going to move into year B. We've read so much of this powerful gospel, and now we've gotten to know Matthew quite well and the Jesus of Matthew quite well, and his upturning of every kind of worldly paradigm and power system. And here in the context, Jesus, the lead into this story is, last week we looked at the 10 maidens and their lamps, and they 5 get left behind when the bridegroom comes. They don't have their oil burning, and the end of that story is keep awake, therefore, for you know neither the day nor the hour. And here Jesus goes into this story, for it is as if a man going on a journey. He doesn't say the kingdom of heaven here is like. He's saying it is as if a man. This is a description, possibly. This is the reading. It's a description of reality in the world where in that time and place, Archelaus, the son of Herod the Great, went to Rome to curry favor, and in his absence, he left all these viceroys in charge to collect a bunch of taxes and expected to get his profits on return. So maybe Jesus is using a sort of thinly veiled allusion to that exploitation going on, and that the viceroys are out to, exploit as much, get as much money as they can from the people. And in the Hebrew scripture, or the Talmud, there's some instruction that, the wisest way to save your money is to bury it in the ground, keep it safe. And
burying your treasure, that was the thing.
They didn't endorse usury or, getting interest and stuff. And anyway, so a kind of Eastern reading or an ancient Middle Eastern reading of this could be that the one who he was more like a conscientious objector to this system. And he takes the money from this master and he won't participate in the system. And, it's possible that Jesus is warning his disciples, this is how it is. You'll get all sorts of joy of your earthly master if you go and participate in the systems of exploitation of the poor and powerless. But if you resist, you will have done the right thing. This is the context of all Jesus' kind of mercy, forgiveness. And when he tells this line, as for this worthless slave, it's still the master speaking in the story. It's not Jesus saying, all those who have more will be given. This is the words of the master in the story. And so it's continuing in that tale that's what they do to the ones who are unproductive, to the point of your T-shirt.
That kind of like flips things on
It
its head.
does. It's completely opposite of every Sunday school instruction and every kind of reading, and in the history of our world, and even in Christianity, this idea of Jesus favoring the powerless, it hasn't really had much impact, I mean, we still think that the one who dies with the most toys wins, and that's the whole idea. But so I found that reading really difficult because all my life I've felt this other kind of wisdom teaching, which it is that we shouldn't bury our talents in the ground, and we should definitely make the most of all we're given and multiply it. And that's true too. I just think as Jesus, the wisdom teacher and the bringer of this movement of justice and inclusion and mercy, and this idea of casting out a worthless slave who can't make more money for the master, it would undo that whole way of Jesus, So I thought that was worth bringing out on the table here. And Jesus says in Matthew, you can't serve God and mammon.
That's true.
He says it's easier for the camel to get through the eye of a needle than a rich man to get into heaven. And, it's challenging. I think none of us love these really, really justice readings are hard for our capitalist society.
We don't bring those out at stewardship time.
Oh, I know. Yeah, right. So we'll be passing by this one. No, but it's all true. Like, I think the readings you've brought forward too are also true and spiritually true and realistically true, that it's wise. But I think there is also a justice piece here that can't get buried, so to speak. And that it's good to hold them both, because when we're multiplying our wealth and all that, we can't forget that the thing that follows this passage is when I was hungry, you gave me something to eat. When I was thirsty, you gave me a drink. When I was a stranger, you welcomed me. There's no way to hold these two in juxtaposed if we don't realize the justice piece that Jesus is all about.
That's a good point. Well, and one of to kind of build on the language of the talents, John, that you were bringing forth, the money. It's money, not just our actual talents, but that this is another case. So I've picked up, Matthew really likes to go big with his descriptions, like over the top, to the point where things in these parables seem ridiculous to where it gets your attention. Yeah. And I think Luke's got a version of this too, where it's a lot less money that's kind of split evenly among the servants or slaves or whatever. But in this case, I mean, a talent was basically 20 years' wage for an average worker. Oh, wow. So if you're thinking of just how much money he's given, he's giving one, 2 talents and 5 talents, and then the one who gets the 5 talents, that's 100 years worth of wage, and he's going away. The master goes away for a long time. So it's like, I've given you this to work with for a long time, that you can live your life with how you decide and what you think you're supposed to do with it. And I think if we look at this as, when I introduce Jesus into the equation here, right? If this is Jesus preparing people, I think it's really about, like, it's not so much Jesus is giving out money, but it's Jesus saying, like, look how much there is to offer from God, from heaven, from me. And are they willing to accept that? into their lives. And then the ones who do, they're all experiencing what comes with that and how it multiplies. You know, where we've got the passages that talk about it will be multiplied 100-fold and things like that.
Yeah.
And so I think to kind of take that here, the ones who really leaned into this goodness, what does he say? Enter into the joy of your master, right? So the ones who really accept that and enter into the joy that they're experiencing, this kind of overflow that's given to them. Then when we get to that last one, I think it's less, if we're looking at Jesus and all this, I don't think Jesus is the master because there's not exactly a Jesus-like behavior that I see there. But I almost see it as kind of, we've talked about other times where does that last person, that last slave here, do this to themselves by bearing it. So it's like, I've offered you what I've offered you the joy and all of that, and you've chosen to just kind of bury it and forget it. And so to that quote, that you said, if you don't want to go to heaven, you can go to hell, or me just saying that we create our own hell sometimes, that, you know, that we kind of resist the light in a way. I think that's kind of the reading I get in this. And I think that's what I love about all of this is there's so many different ways we can approach this text. And like you just did with us a little while ago, flipped so much of that on its head, and it gives us a whole new thing to chew on.
Yeah.
So as I was going through that, that's kind of where this was taking me. Beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that reading is super interesting, and I think does resonate in some significant ways with, you know, what Jesus was about. So I really love that. And I love that parables are these multifaceted stories that lend themselves to numerous readings, and that we can imagine that Jesus maybe had numerous meanings in mind, a bit like, you know, a poem or a painting that you can come to time and again and see something different.
Right.
See new qualities and so on. So I think that's really great. And I think no matter how you look at it, there's a justice piece, because if Jesus is speaking this against the religious authorities, principally how they failed, both in Jesus's time and the way they're described by the prophets in the Old Testament, at the top of the list for why they are being denounced as failing to live up to their vocation, live into their vocation as God's people in the light of the world, is their treatment of the vulnerable and of the poor, the widow and the orphan and the alien, not the UFO alien, but you know, the people from somewhere else.
Right.
So I think either way we get that quite strongly. But you know, yeah, that I don't believe that Jesus is saying that he or God, you know, literally throws people into outer darkness and so on. But I do believe that there is a warning here. I mean, not only because of the parable on its own, but because of Matthew's gospel generally, which does have this theme of a final judgment, and then this section of Matthew in particular, which deals with it, because the following passage with, you know, the part that we love to quote is, when I was hungry, you gave me something to eat. And when I had no clothes, you gave me clothes, and I was thirsty, you gave me something to drink. We love that part, rightly. But the much more challenging part is what follows. When I was hungry, you didn't give me food. When I was thirsty, you didn't give me something to drink, which is like, okay, as far as it goes. But what happens to those people is that they are sent away to eternal punishment.
John,
which, of course,
we don't talk about that part.
Well, we're going to have to, because it's next up.
Right.
But we don't like to talk about it, especially
right.
in traditions such as our own, which don't talk about hell very much. But it's there. You know, what eternal punishment means, I'm not making any claims about right now, but it's not good. You know, I think it's fair enough. It might, you know, some theologians going back to antiquity have argued that in the long view, it actually is all working to the good, that there's some sort of pruning involved. But either way, it's not something that you want to happen to you.
Right.
You know, it's best avoided.
Yeah. And as we've said many times, it's something that you fall into when you willfully choose not to enter into the life and joy of the kingdom right here and now. Yeah. And, you know, all these readings, all three that we have brought forward today go back to, like, you know, the 3rd century Eusebius or even earlier, but they're written out in those early days. So I think, you know, from all time, people have been grappling and shifting their angle on these texts, and it's true. It's what makes them so powerful.
Yeah.
Our collect on this day is about Scripture and how it's intended for our learning and reproval and all that. And I think that we've done it. We've demonstrated that right now, that we're kind of bringing out the more and more riches of these texts. That's and right. not keeping it buried in an arcane sort of reading. But it's important, and I think that's one thing I value so much about this podcast, is just being able to talk about it out loud and get all these different points of view. So we hope, listeners, that you'll engage with that yourselves, and whether with us or with one another. Find a group to talk about the Holy Scriptures together with. It really does bring out so much more.
Oh, yeah.
Any last words, or are we ready to wrap?
I have one, is that, in the context of parables about and warnings about judgment and so on, and outer darkness and who's thrown into the outer darkness, is that what's really important not to lose sight of is that Jesus himself is going into the outer darkness, on the cross, and he's going there so we don't have to. So all this is done in the wider reality of God's grace and love and desire to heal us and to gather us in, which I think is a very important thing to bear in mind, and I think softens this a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And at least for us, not for him.
Yeah, right. Not for him.
He's about to go there.
He's okay now.
He's okay now.
It all works
Spoiler
out, folks. If you haven't gotten to the end of the Bible yet. Well, and I guess my final point would be would be less theological, but no less important right now. If you do want to wrestle, and let us know about some of these things that are coming up for you, you can call our hotline. And we'll put the number on the screen if you're watching, and we'll put it in the description if you're listening. So call us up, leave a voicemail.
We'd love to hear from you. Thanks a lot. Thanks, you too. And see you all in church. Have a great week.